Shalom, good morning. For the most of you, it's good morning. And welcome, everyone. My name is Sharon Bershatsky, and I'm the director of the Israel Tourist Office in London. And I'd like to, again, welcome you all today. And thank you, everyone, that joined us from literally all over the world. The UK, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, France, Spain, Switzerland, Austria, the Emirates, Azerbaijan, everywhere. As many other countries, Israel is dealing at the moment with the second wave of the COVID-19. But while we wait for the travel world to recover, we continue to work hard, bringing you events like this one. Israel is the land of inspiration, and now more than ever, we all need something to be inspired. Israel, and more specifically the city of Tel Aviv, has become the fashion capital of the Middle East. And for some time now, it's seen as a major global fashion destination with talented and creative designers taking a spot in the global stage. From the famous Gotex swimsuit brand to Kobe Levy, who designed Lady Gaga's shoes, Shachar Avnet, Alon Livne, and many more other names that you will hear about them here today. Now, without further chatting from my side, I'm very happy to introduce to you all to Galit Reisman, who will lead our session today. Galit is a fashion icon, mentor, educator. Her love of fashion turned into a burning passion when she became the founder of TLV Style, a unique brand and personalized tour service that takes visitors, like you, to the city's most innovative studios. Please submit any question you might have into our chat box, and Galit will try to answer it all at the end of our session today. Galit, the stage is yours.
Thank you, guys. I will share the presentation. One second. Yes. So wonderful. So let's start. Good morning, and thank you, Sharon, for the introduction. So yes, my name is Galit Reisman, and as Sharon said, I'm a fashion entrepreneur. And I have to say that I even consider myself as a person of people. I believe in people, and I believe in the spirit of creativity. And myself, I love to, driven by the curiosity to investigate the DNA of Tel Aviv, the city that I love so much, and the emerging designer scene. And today I will take you with me to my ongoing research in this beautiful fashion world. So a few words deepen about myself, how it's all started. When I was a little kid, I was driving to downtown Tel Aviv with my mother to the beautiful area of Shalom Tower. I don't know if you know, but the Shalom Tower that located in the end of or beginning of Rothschild Boulevard and the border of the beautiful neighborhood Neve Tzedek was the highest building in the whole Middle East in the 70s. But not only that, it was surrounded by fashion brands and ateliers. And I still feel like the fascinated 9 years old visiting the studios and people and fascinated by the rhythm, the beat of Tel Aviv and its culture. I took the traditional route after the army, graduated from actually management and communication, and immersed myself in the media field for 9 years. But in the age of 30, all the dots started to connect and lead me to the right direction, and that was a spiritual guided growth. I was lucky to start as a rep manager to 9 collective of fashion accessories designer in the US, and flew frequently to New York, led more than 35 trade shows at the Javits Center, selling Israeli products to buyers all over the state and Canada. 2 things happened to me back then. I started to understand the code of innovation and creativity coming from Tel Aviv. And in the other hand, I started to feel this feeling being Israeli fashion ambassador. 10 years ago, in the age of 35, I decided to free my spirit higher. And like Sharon said, I founded TLV Style, the first and leading fashion tourism service, hosting people from all over the world, bridging between the creative community and the international communities, hosting private families and Jewish federations, and telling the stories of the human stories, the human fabric, the human creative side. If in the past I was selling products, today I'm selling stories. And that is aside panels, curating content, and event that I'm all doing to share the story of Israeli fashion. I want to take you with me to feel the beat of the tours that I'm leading in Tel Aviv. So Tel Aviv was and still is my biggest inspiration, is the city that's really driving my activity. And I love to quote, and will be the start of our journey, the Coco Chanel, what she said, that fashion doesn't exist only in a dress. Fashion exists in the sky, in the birds, and in the people's stories and places. And that reflects beautifully what I'm sharing with my people and a lot of journalists from all over the world through the Ministry of Tourism, because the story of fashion is a reflection of the story of our people and society. So how it's all began? Actually, before Israel establishment, in 1904, the lady that you see in the picture, Chemda Ben Yehuda, that was the wife of Eliezer Ben Yehuda, the person that revived the Hebrew language, she coined the word fashion, ofna, into the Israeli or the Hebrew city press. She was actually the first fashionista, and she spread the trends that came from Paris and immersed herself in the female empowerment stories. In the beginning of our story of Israel, the first decades, we could see two group of aesthetic idols that were differ from each other in terms of design and production and marketing. And that was resulted of two opposing ideologic stream, the socialism and the liberalism. And the company that was reflected mostly by the socialism was Atta. The man that established Atta was Mr. Erlich Muller, that immigrated to Israel in 1934. He was a Zionist, socialist, and he became one of the pioneering in the textile empire industry of Israel. And he brought the vision, forms follow function, like in the 30s that we could see in the architects in Israel of the Bauhaus, lack of decorative, straight lines. That was the definition of the brand that was identified with the utility fashion. We need to remember that in the early days of the country, most of the inhabitants that were in Israel came with a lack of money in their pockets, that they were mostly the Second World War survivor. And they were focusing in the reviving and the family unit and building the country. And that was the period of austerity that characters also in fashion. But versus that, aside, different from the socialism, were the liberalism, the people that settled in the first Hebrew country with money that came for the war. And they were the people that were infected or influenced by the glamour that came from Europe. We could see a lot of European industrialists, couturists, fashion photographer, tailors, and the lady that was mostly identified with them was Lola Bear. She used to said, by the way, she also arrived to Israel in 39 from the Czech Republic. And she used to said that between the khaki and the clothes and and the colony of England. Between this and this, there is nothing. She considered herself as the national dresser, and she really wanted to help to bloom Israel. Remember those two aesthetic streams, because it will be relevant to the conversation about the current young designers. I want also to mention that in the early days, because it's such a relevant topic to understand how the conversation about Israeli fashion started. In the early years, the country was dealing what will be the national garment that people will wear. And they were looking really to find one unifying garment that will symbolize the renewed Hebrew culture and will bridge between Jewish community that come together in terms of religious, East and West. They wanted to find clothes that everybody will wear and will identify with the new climate, the new culture, the new fabrics that we had in Israel. But quickly they understood that it's very hard to find only one garment that will fit all, because we need to remember that Israel was and still multiplicity of affiliation, and this melting pot really was hard to find one garment, and that was the start of the conversation. What is the Israeli garment all about? And I will take you to there soon. Today in our journey, I will share with you my top values and characters that help me to define Israeli fashion and Israeli society. And the first term that I want to share is about the entrepreneurship spirit that we have in Israel. And the first two icons that were fashion entrepreneurs, not a fashion designers, of course, were Mrs. Ruth Dayan that founded Maskit, the first and only fashion house in Israel in 1954. And the second icon was, as Sharon mentioned, Leah Gottlieb that founded Gotex. And an anecdote about the entrepreneurship spirit, when Mrs. Gottlieb arrived to Israel, originally she started a raincoat store with their husband in Tel Aviv on King George Street. But quickly she understood that she won't be able to sell raincoat in the Levantine weather. So she shifted her business models, like we call it today, to the famous bathing suit. So both of them were female that working in the 50s. Both of them recognized the opportunities in their time. Maskit decided to empower craft women, and that came with different background, and to create new jobs for the new immigrants. Both of them took inspiration from the landscape of Israel, coloring of the bright Middle East, the sea, the colors of the tent, the desert, really were influenced by Israel fabrics and climate, as well as Maskit. We need to remember that in the early days, it was a governmental company, and part of the support of the country in the fashion world helped to grow this industry in the early days of the country. And they really did very well during the years. In the 60s, that was the glamorous time of the Israeli fashion. We need to remember that it started to be like open change in the world with the miniskirt of Maria Quant and the ethnic style that the Beatles brought. And a lot of attention that came to the Israeli, the young country, mostly after the 6 Days War. People were like, buyers were coming to Israel, and Israel Bonds did a lot of fashion shows with inside and outside Israel. And that was the glamorous years of celebration of Israel. It started to change in the late 70s. By the way, in the 70s was established the most important fashion academic school in Israel, Shenkar College, that even been rewarded by BOF, Business of Fashion, in place 6 in the world, even before FIT, which is like, we are on the map. In the 80s, independent designers started to appear, like Doreen Frankfurt one of the most Israeli iconic local designer that is still working in our industry. And in the 90s, designers like Gideon Oberzon that was leading a small fashion house under his name with his daughter Karen Oberzon, and started his career with support from the government and the Ministry of the Israel Export Institute, but unfortunately closed his door last year. And I decided to mention him because I think that tells our story that in Israel we still have lack of heritage and lack of culture of fashion. Because if a man that was leading fashion house for 54 years, shutting it down and different from Europe, none of the young designers taking over to continue his legacy tells something about our very, very young positioning country. In the 80s started the globalization. And of course, a lot of the production was shifting to the Far East. And that affected a lot since then our industry. Also, the government pulled their hands for investing in fashion, shifted that to the ecosystem, the startup nation as we know it today. And if it brings me to the most relevant topic of our talk today, after the history about the current designers, we have booming inflation of young designers that graduating the academic school in Israel. And when they immerse themselves in the market, they don't have big fashion houses like you guys in Europe to go to intern, to learn methodologic and techniques. Reality in Israel pushing them immediately to become independent. And because of them, I'm calling them the new fashion entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs in Israel facing a lot of lack of support from the institute, lack of support, lack of materials wise. We have only a lot of leftover. The size of the market, the competition, the buying power is very, very weak here. Vendors, craft people, but on top of everything is the threat of the fast fashion as we all know it. And I mentioned here in my slide companies that are Israeli and are beautiful, but still producing in China. And in the last decade, a lot of international brands like Zara, H&M, COS, Mango, etc., were entering Israel. And that is really giving fight and giving difficulties to our independent designers that are part of the slow fashioners movement. And I guess that you are, if part of you coming from the fashion world, you know what is the definition of slow fashion, but I will share with everybody that are designers that working in their origin, in their country, in small quantities, everything done handmade. And what is most important for me, supporting the fair trade that luckily we in Israel don't have child labor. So I want to take you into another short movie that will help us to bring me to the second value about locality. If they are working locally and if they are doing their own fashion stories, I keep looking for the ones that are connected to their local inspiration, to their local stories, and then breaking to the international market. This is the only way they can shine. And like the lady in the picture, Mrs. Lee Edelcourt, the most important fashion trend forecaster in the world, living in Netherlands, saying that the new decades and the new time, even now, under the COVID-19 pandemic, is a new opportunity. And the fashion with the big F, as we know it, won't exist anymore. And this is the time maybe to return back to couture, to textile, to the handwork. Let's see part of the designer working, and I brought, of course, a glimpse into the local fashion week from 2019, because this year, of course, it was canceled under the pandemic.
My inspirations for the collection are coming from Israel.
It's a tremendous opportunity for us as designers to present our collection. It's something that we are so happy to be part of, and it's really a way to show the nice face of Israel. The collection that we are presenting is the meeting point between summer and fall. On the opening night, I presented a dress that was worn by Bar Rafaeli. The dress is made out of 15,000 of Israeli coins. It was a very, very nice presentation of heritage of Israel and the beauty of fashion.
Excited to be here today because it's my first runway, and we're gonna see lots of nature, bugs, butterflies.
My inspiration is really my life. We live in a very inspiring place. Lifestyle in Israel is very unique. It is somewhere between high-tech and the beach, dancing on tables in family parties to red carpet events.
So I guess it will open your taste to come to Israel next Fashion Week. However, a few more stories that will highlight the topic of big local. So of course, Mesquite Fashion House that I mentioned from the past. A young designer, her name is Sharon Tal, revived this brand 7 years ago and continued the legacy of the fashion house, and that became a small only fashion house that we have in Israel. After 3 years being the head embroidery designers in McQueen in London, she decided to continue this kind of legacy, be connected to her own roots and our story, and creating high fashion combined with delicate work, taking inspiration from the landscape of Israel. You can see in this slide, of course, the famous and the iconic desert coat that was being selling in even Manhattan in the 60s through all country, and the new version of it under the collection of Desert Path. And in the right side of the slide, example of a garment taking inspiration from the Dead Sea, the lowest place in the world that we have here in Israel. She's taken a lot of inspiration. Prayer shawl, the talit. And again, it's so beautiful to see how you can take iconic symbols like the talit and make it international contemporary garment. In the picture you see here Sharon Tal and the legacy lady, Miss Ruth Dayan, that she's still alive and turned only 103 this year. Now under the pandemic, it's really interesting to see how the young designers are struggling and as entrepreneurs looking for the solution to continue their businesses. And under this time, Mesquite decided to expand their collection. And like in the past, that fashion house, of course, is a place where you are not selling only clothes, but you sell contemporary and complementary products. In the past, they were selling jewelry and rugs and gifts. So now under the pandemic, Mesquite opened the stores to independent designers in Israel and giving them stage to sell also their products to the world, even online. And it's a beautiful, beautiful gesture and a beautiful continued legacy. They called it matana. Matana in Hebrew, it's a present. Another inspiring story is the lady Michal Mengistu, Ethiopian lady that I'm following her after she graduated from Bezalel Academic College. Bezalel was founded before Shenkar. It's located in Jerusalem in Israel. But when she graduated, she understood that she needs to bring value in order to shine through in this industry. And she decided to connect to her memories from her childhood in the Ethiopian village with her parents. She immigrated to Israel when she was 9 years old. And unfortunately, she was experiencing a trauma in her life that 1 year later, her parents were killed in a car accident. So since then, she was growing with her sister and brother in a different family, taking a lot of courage and inner strength in her spirit to recover and to continue to celebrate life. And nowadays, under her collection, she is really celebrating the spirit of the vivid imagination, life, and memories. She empowering Ethiopian third age women to continue to sew, learning them the technique that she's brought from her childhood, and creating beautiful contemporary garment. By the way, the company Akal is under her mother name, and in Amharic, Akal means soul. If I'm taking you to third, we were talking about entrepreneurship in fashion, locality. The third important value is innovation. And I want to start with the lady of Noor Aviv, because again, innovation usually identified with Israel, with the ecosystem, with the startup nation. But you can see a lot of not only fashtech technology in the application in fashion, that we have great stories, but designers more and more combine technology of 3D printers in the Israeli fashion scene. The first one was Noor Aviv. When she graduated with the owner from Shenkar College, she created a collection that she wanted to pass criticism on the fast fashion, that everything is duplicating and replicating. And she wanted to bring a message, a value in her culture. So she created on the computer a distorted visual object and printed them in industrial 3D printers, and added to the print delicate handwork. In that way, she did exactly what Lee Edelcourt is talking about, creating originality, uniqueness garment that nobody can copy. The second lady that followed her was Danit Peleg. She also graduated with honor, and she did a collection made in a 3D home printer, which is unbelievable. I will show you a short movie, and then I will add to that.
Last year, I unveiled a ready-to-wear collection printed entirely at home. I was amazed by the incredible global attention that 3D printed fashion got. 3D printed fashion even made it to a mainstream stage, such as the opening ceremony of the Paralympic Games in Rio. But the technology still has many challenges, and until now has only been available for the runway. In the past year, I have worked to make 3D printed fashion available to more people, which is why I created an online store letting anyone customize, personalize, and order my new jacket. It takes 100 hours to print every jacket, which is why I can only print a limited edition of 100. I believe that one day we'll be able to download our clothes and print them at home. But until then, finally you can buy 3D printed clothes online.
So So I want you to remember that day, because I do believe, like Danit, that like the cellular revolution 15 years ago, nobody thought it will be part of our hands, our motion, our mind, our mental life. I do believe that everybody will have a 3D home printer, and we will be able to download in one click and create our own wardrobe. And that conversation is important for me also under the conversation of the sustainability in fashion, because yes, the material is not green and not ecological. However, we are dealing with fashion that has no leftover, and we are also giving solution to transportation that we don't need to send garments from place to place. And the last story that we'll identified with the innovation, tech innovation side, will be the story of Eden Saadon, a lady that graduated from the textile department. And textile designers are really close to my heart, because if I mention the early days that we had really an amazing fashion stories, we had a textile empire in Israel. The textile industry was leading all over the world. We weren't only producing a garment to our local industry, but Louis Vuitton and Yves Saint Laurent and designers and brands and fashion houses from all over the world in the 60s and 70s were collaborating in Israel. Unfortunately, since the globalization, it shut it down completely during the years. But I'm optimistic that thanks to the textile young designers graduated from Shenkar, they will revive and bring solution. And I was amazed to be introduced to Eden, that she using 3D pen to doodle pen to create new laces. So again, 3-minute movie from your time, but it's important to understand how Israeli designers and Israeli minds are pushing our industry and society further in the world.
Hi, my name is Eden Saadon. I'm a textile designer from Tel Aviv, Israel. My story begins exactly a year ago, when I came across an internet commercial about a 3D pen manufactured by a company called 3Doodler. During my textile design studies at Shenkar College of Design in Tel Aviv, I learned how to produce fabric structures made of yarns using various techniques, such as weaving, knitting, and flatting. The pen has a rather simple mechanism. It is an electrical device that has to be connected to the socket on the wall. It is an inlet for introducing a polymer rod, a driver that moves the rod forward in 2 possible speeds, and an extruder head that heats and melts the polymer rod and discharges the melted material. First, I experimented with polymers called PLA and ABS, which are known in the field of 3D printing. I wanted to make a bra, which is a small article of clothing that has to fulfill functionality, maintain shape, and present some flexibility. I discovered that these materials were very rigid and fragile. Then, I moved to another kind of polymer offered by the producer of the pen, called Flexi, which is TPU that turned out to have the qualities I was looking for. It was strong, flexible, and environmental friendly. The use of Flexi allowed me to produce surfaces having textile qualities, like draping, movement, flexibility, and lightness. I made a collection of delicate feminine lace garments using a single tool, the 3D pen, single material, Flexi, and single color, black. I decided to work that way in order to emphasize the many capabilities of the 3D pen. I think that the novelty of my designs comes from the fact that the 3D drawing makes the fabric itself. There are no stitches, and the garment takes the body shape during the process of the drawing, and is custom-made for a specific person, without the use of a layout. I live in Israel, which is a country with a strong high-tech sense. In my work, I try to interweave between new technologies and old textile traditions. Thank you.
And I want to say something about her creation, because Israel in the world known for the success of the bridal designers. We had a lot of big names like Pnina Tornay and Yaniv Percy and Inbal Dror that really doing extremely well. And Sharon mentioned Alon Livne that even dressed Beyonce. But it's beautiful to see that in her collaboration with Murat Wellinger studio, now she's replacing the traditional laces in this 3 doodle laces technique, and it's fascinating to follow. But again, I want to take you into the world of innovation that mostly and the majority exist in the traditional way. Designers that using unique form and fabrics and a lot of inner inspirations, not necessarily connected to technology. And the first lady that I want to share with you a vivid fashion show that she did. Her name is Shachar Avnet. She's a young lady that following her internal inspiration world of relationship with the women in her life, mental process, really deep research about life and loving ourselves and female body, different from a lot of designers that looking for external inspiration, like I mentioned, the history, tradition, landscape of Israel, etc. And I want to show you that in Israel, that although still most of the designers are doing ready-to-wear functional clothes and functional to our street and climate, you can find designers that pushing the boundaries of imagination and influence our women in the streets. So this is her line, but she has a really deep philosophy. She is believing that there is no darkness without light. There is no noise without silence. And her imagination and dreams also connected her to the stylist of Beyonce. And in the left side, you can see that after 1 year activity only, she dressed Beyonce 5 times already, and another international figures like Zendaya and etc. and etc. And this is only part of the list. And it's really inspiring to find this kind of ladies in Israel that influence the image of our society, the image of femininity, and she has an important role in our industry. Another guy that pushing the boundaries of materials wise, his name is Elisha Bargel. He is considered himself as a drifter. He's driving a lot of city and taking inspiration from the roots of the city and combine it and pour them into the designs. He creating hybrid collection using material like traditional materials like silk and combine them with innovative materials like mesh. But I think also himself under the COVID-19 pandemic understood that with all the difficulty to reach his audiences that lives a lot of outside Israel, because he's doing really clever, high-end, ready-to-wear collection, he created a capsule collection that under the doing something good, like collection with a cause, combining forces with the Friends of Soroka Hospital. And in the collection, that the only few garments and part of the revenue going back to the hospital. Alicia said something really interesting about the connection of Tel Aviv and fashion. And since part of you guys are people that are dealing with tourism, I think he brings an interesting insight about the connection between the two.
What does Tel Aviv fashion mean to you?
Wow, a tricky one, I must say. I think that fashion in Tel Aviv is something that is quite unique because it's not necessarily goes together. Because fashion is something very, usually it comes with a certain kind of aesthetic. And Tel Aviv brings something that is super energetic, colorful, alive, young, like with a lot of kind of vibrant. So I think that Tel Aviv fashion is more about the challenge, how to bring both of them together, how to bring Tel Aviv and the essence of fashion together. I think the collaboration of those two is something very challenging. So that's the way I see connecting, like fashion and Tel Aviv.
I personally admire this guy. He's so interesting, and you need to follow all of them on Instagram, and you'll see his vivid, so different collection for Israeli designer. And remember Lola Bear that I mentioned from the early days of the country? Since she was a couturist and a tailor's, sorry, and she used to say, I'm quoting Lola Bear, 1 second, sorry about it. It's true that my standard, the prices are expensive, 18, 19 pounds for sewing a dress. However, dressing properly and looking handsome is not luxurious, even though in Israel it's thought so. So I think we are still evolving into this heritage of bringing fashion that will be considered okay as more expensive but more valuable. And another aspect of innovation and fabric, this lady Adi Banjo, she also created comfortable, laid-back, super cool collection from spandex, unique, innovative from sportwear. And she found a solution to the lack of materials that we have in Israel, and she combined all the closure of buttons and zippers, like taking inspiration from the boxes packaging, how it's folded together. But I'm mentioning her not only because of her innovation line, because now she been finished a program in FIT, been selected 1 out of 24 international designers in a program of MBA in FIT. And she believing that we need to push the boundaries of consumer behavior. And like Leah Edelcourt said, the future is non-seasonal collection, something that Adi started from the early days after Shankar. And she's now moving more and more into online, creating relationship with her clientele, creating experiencing that everything is customized and everything is designing together that will be curated for them and will change the consumer behavior in the fashion. 1 second, oops. One topic before the end, one of the most important topic, even now under the pandemic, all the fashion world is talking about the sustainability and the need for transparency and authenticity and to understand who made our clothes. And one of the pioneering of textile designer that coming from the eco-friendly side, her name is Tomu Ati, to the brand Tushaya, that in the early days of her studies in Shankar, when she heard that fashion is the second most polluting industry in the world, she understood that she wanted to do something good to our young country, our small society. And she researched and found 2 biodegradable materials using bamboo and soy. And today she's creating unbelievable scarves and tops weaving on a handloom in downtown Tel Aviv, and really supporting the trend that now became trend. She was pioneering 10 years ago of sustainable, important garment to our planet. Here it's Tom and the process, taking a lot of inspiration from nature. But you can do ecological fashion, also haute couture. Dana Cohen, she is a daughter of a farmer, and she was experienced personally the change of the influence of the climate, the global change, and the urbanization. She was also herself a decoder of aerial photographers in the army. So she decided to take these two inspiration into the collection of city growth and combine all the aerial NASA photographer of the evidence of the change of the ground as the coloring of the collection. But what she is doing in her collection, she is using innovative approach to ecological fabric manufacturing while discarded knits that are shirted into fibers and then felted them into recycled new materials. Again, before the pandemic, she had a lot of meetings in Paris and in Europe and also in the Far East. Unfortunately, everything now is stopped, but she is doing extremely unbelievable, unique collection coming out from Tel Aviv. The last topic that I want to raise is the coexistence, something that usually people are not paying enough attention when we're talking about Israeli fashion. When you walk in Tel Aviv street or you are meeting designers, you will see a lot of design that can be inspired from the international global, not necessarily trend, because designers, Israeli designers are not following trends, they are following their own stories. But there is lack of conversation about coexistence. And I want to highlight one that she is working in this field, Michal Idesh. During Tzuk Eitan war, she was curious to find not only what happening to young kids in Israel, but what happening to young kids in Gaza. And in her research, she met an architect in Gaza. Of course, they never met, but they created together. He was one of the few that agreed to talk with her, but they created a collection called Bridging, taking his sketches from architects' building and translated them into her design, which is fascinating and important to the conversation of local creation. She's now living in Munich, creating new collection. I want to send her regards from Munich, and after that, I will sum everything up.
Hi, I'm very glad for this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Michal Idesh. I'm an Israeli fashion designer. And I believe that as all of us are getting dressed, we love to get dressed and we will get dressed forever, it's actually a great platform to also convey messages. I'm trying to be as purpose-driven as possible while using materials that are actually helping the environment and the people who are wearing them. They are anti-coronavirus and anything else, and actually literally healing the body. I'm collaborating with a Palestinian creative partner from Gaza, whom unfortunately I can't even share his name, in order to protect him and his life and his loved ones. And we can't meet, we work together online for 6 years now. We also created a collection inspired by my volunteer work with refugees from around the world, mainly from Syria, in refugee camps in Europe. And now I'm working on a very special collection, which is also for people with physical disabilities and also for anyone else. So it's a completely new way to get dressed, using an amazing, innovative material, and hopefully will bring a lot of light and joy to people around the world, also people without physical disabilities, and actually talking about the fact that we all have many different, unique, and great abilities. So thank you so much for being here. I'm wishing you a great evening, and let's stay in touch. Ciao.
By the way, you can see that a lot of the faces of the videos of the young designers that I brought, they are young audiences. So you can see that there are entrepreneurs, the next generation of the fashion world influence our society. So a lot of the people that I'm hosting from all over the world, they keep asking me, so if they are mostly young, do you have international success? So yes, we have extremely beautiful success stories and awareness all over the world. And I want to start actually with a guy that is not young anymore, but Albert Albaz, that was the head designer of Lanvin. He was in the first cycle of studies in Shankar academic house, but of course he's one of the big figures in the fashion world in Europe. We have the international figure of Beyonce being dressed over and over again by a local fashion designer in Baldror and in Shachar Avnet that I mentioned, Kobe Levy that Sharon mentioned in her introduction, that again, if designers are not following trends and they are following their vivid imagination, Kobe is definitely one of them, creating handcrafted shoes one by one that you need to visit his site to understand what is Israeli spirit all about. Even Whoopi Goldberg were become one of his close client. And designer like Ed Miner, the first Israeli young designer that won the Karl Lagerfeld Prize last year. And I will finish with Maor Tzabar, one of the beautiful designer that is doing also fashion clothing, custom for theater and stage, but is also one of the leading head designer in Israel. I consider him our Irish head designer, Philip Tracy, and see the collection that he designed under the COVID-19 pandemic. Super inspiring. So when I finishing usually my tours in Israel on ground of Tel Aviv, I asking my people how you define Israeli fashion after the 2, 3, 4, and 5 hours experience. And it's beautiful to see that all of them are taking words that are reflecting not necessarily the fashion world. None of them saying, oh my God, your fashion is so classic, your fashion is so bohemian. Everybody using words like originality and brave and innovation, independent and eclectic. And I have to say that those words are reflection for Israeli society from the early days on the country till nowadays. So I want to thank you all. I will close the presentation, and of course, I will love to answer any question that you may have.
Wow, Galit, thank you so much. It was super interesting. And although there are some experts in the audience, I think everyone learned something, at least something, one new thing. Sorry. Okay, let's see a few questions that we had. First question is, who are the top stylists in Israel currently? I think it's a very tough question.
Stylist, the first one that popped into my head, Sivan Chaimi. I can write it here.
In the chat, okay, great.
She is totally one of the top stylists that dress the leading celebs icon doing international collaborations. So, and I will send in later on more names, but she is totally one to follow. She is extremely innovative in her approach of styling.
We had a question regarding, I think he meant Ayala Bar. Any connection to Lola Bar or just a coincidence?
Wow, I need to be careful with that answer. I think it's considered by accident, but I will.
You can investigate.
I will have to double check it.
Let's see if I missed anything. You got a lot of compliments. We had a statement from Paolo. Maybe you want to read it over the chat because it's quite long. So Galit, if you want to read it yourself.
Maybe I will take a picture and read it later or now, because I don't want to hold
it's interesting. So you can read it quickly.
Hello. I'm writing from Milan, and capital city of design, fashion, and in pret-a-porter. I think that one of the important and interesting areas in the development of the new materials may be technical and particular characterized that allow to give new life and new applications totally to clothes. I think of what has been done by many famous brands that have revived their products line with fabrics from sport apparel, sailing, and then be used in everything life. For instance, Ermenglido Zegna. Israel is a fantastic powerhouse for innovation in new fabric with better perspiration, able to change in color for the sun of temperature of the, or they can guarantee. Cleaning lines could be one of the points of strength in Israel, from the bench to Tel Aviv fashion, from the bench to the Tel Aviv Fashion Week. I do agree, first of all, thank you for that. And I do agree that in terms of materials, this is the future, by the way, of fashion. All the fashion world are talking about it, not only the trend forecasters. And I do agree that the lack of that we have here, in a way, pushing our young industry to find new solutions and new development, and then can be transparent and spread all over the world. And I believe in collaboration and the future. Again, we are under pandemic, and the fashion world is to be one of the most infected, but I'm staying optimistic that a new era will start out of it. And I do agree that the potential from our young country is huge.
Galit, can you say anything about, you talked quite a lot about, especially women fashion. Can you talk about men fashion as well?
So we do have few, but I will have to say that the few tries that we had, because of the size of the market and because of the lack of culture of fashion that we have in our society, that men's are still can be found in weddings, also in jeans and flip-flop. This lack of codes of fashion bring a lot of challenge to young designer to create menswear. However, you can find men's like that he's doing extremely well in Italy and Europe mostly, is Eliran Nargassi. His story is very unique because he was raised in an Orthodox society in Jerusalem, and only when he was 18, he not only like became secular, he left to Tel Aviv, he even went out of the closet. He's a gay, beautiful person that graduated from Shankar, and nowadays is one of the most famous menswear designer in the world, that taking inspiration from his own background of the religious background, and the way he pours this inspiration into the design. So we have a few more, but very few in our market, unfortunately, because of the demand of the population here.
Galit, thank you so much. I know you can talk about this topic for hours, and this is what you do. You talk about it for hours. And we are waiting to invite everyone for one of your tours, real live tours in Israel in hopefully the near future. Before that, we will make sure to send everyone the recording from today with some extra materials and pictures. So again, thank you everyone from all over the world that joined us today. Thank you again, Galit. And
we'll see you soon. It was my honor. Thank you.